The question that I wanted to lay out in this first hour, in the second hour, we're going to have this guy from We Build the Wall Incorporated on. We're going to debate the wall and all that kind of stuff. And in our third hour, I want to get into some of the topics that, frankly, go beyond that. You know, the lessons of Youngstown Steel and all that sort of thing. But the first one is the crises that we're facing. There's and my question to you is, of all the crises that we are facing right now in the United States, Trump, of course, is asserting that brown people coming from Mexico with drugs and gang tattoos, at least in his mind, right? In his delusional, paranoid mind, that's our biggest crisis, right? That's worth a national emergency. Well, if you're going to have a national emergency, what are the real crises? And I think that this is an important question, because if Trump gets away with his emergency declaration, and Congress, and he kind of laid this out, as did Alec Baldwin, and Congress says, no, it's not really an emergency, sorry. And then he vetoes that congressional resolution, which undoes his declaration of emergency, and then Congress fails to overturn his veto. That means that he gets his emergency. And then he can move a few $1 billion around, and he can, build some more of his wall or whatever he wants to do. But the question is, what are the real crises that we're facing? I mean, if Trump is going to blow up the Constitution, if he's going to violate Article 1, Section 9, if he's going to say, no, I am like King George III, I am the one who decides how money gets spent, and I'm the one who takes his tax money and spends it however I want. If he does that successfully, and McConnell and the other Republicans kind of go along with him, and yeah, okay, all right, no problem, then, and a Democratic president comes in behind him and says, this is all well and good, but we actually have some real emergencies here. I mean, the IPCC says that we now have, 11 years, 10 years to basically go to zero carbon, or we're going to see the destruction of much of what we call civilization, and possibly even the destruction of the human race. We have, schools that are failing. We have, in large part because of the whole racist history of funding schools with property taxes. We have more than 500,000 American children suffering from lead poisoning. There was an interesting piece in the New York Times, actually, back a week or so ago, that listed some of the things that could be done with the $5 billion that Donald Trump wants for his wall. And I'll just go through this list and as possibilities. But what I'd like to hear from you at 202-808-9925 is, what do you think are the real emergencies that we're facing? I mean, if we're gonna declare an emergency, or if a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, a Democratic president comes along and has a Democratic Congress, and I think that that's entirely possible, by the way, which of these crises would you like to see us, would you like to see a Democratic president basically lay his presidency or her presidency on the line to do something about it? And how do we fight back when we are being overwhelmed by the GOP power structure, and when the majority of Americans are one paycheck away from, having a crisis themselves? So some of the things we could do with the $5 billion that Trump is going to take from someplace. We don't know yet, probably out of the military budget. There was some discussion earlier that he was going to take, emergency funds for California and Puerto Rico, not Texas. No. Texas is a red state, but California, Puerto Rico. But, we just don't know yet, right? And we'll find that out as the week goes on. But for example, more than 500,000 American children suffer from lead poisoning every year. This is an epidemic of lost potential. Lead poisoning measurably reduces IQ. and increases the propensity for violence. To solve that problem nationwide, to literally have contractors, whether they're government agencies or people that we hire using government money, to have contractors go through and get all the lead paint out of American homes and get the lead water lines out. $125 million. Save the lives of 500,000 children. Trump doesn't consider that important at all, so that ain't happening. For $438 million, we could put over 1 million long-acting reversible contraceptives. They're called LARCs, IUDs, implants, things like that, for at-risk young women. And that's based on the cost of $438 per person. That's $438 million. We can provide comprehensive drug treatment for 40,000 mothers for 18 months. We've got roughly, the best guess is right now that with children under 2 years old, there's about 40,000 mothers who are actually addicted to drugs right now. And at the cost of $28,000 each for 18 months for drug treatment, we could spend $1 billion and solve that problem. We could save 40,000 children's lives. We could for $650 million, we could send visiting home nurses to 100,000 pregnant moms and their newborn children, shortly after they give birth, and help them out. For $311 million, this is chump change compared to the $5 billion that Trump wants. We could give methadone treatment to 47,000 narcotics addicts in the United States. For $4.5 billion, we could provide Medicaid to 3.78 million children. We could give them health care. Almost 4 million children. For $73 million, we could give VA health care to 7,000 returning troops. For $250 million, we could radically reduce gang violence in the United States. For $11 million, we could buy back 118,000 guns. For $200 million, we could provide permanent housing for 200,000 homeless people. For $720 million, we could provide an employment program for adults in public housing. 90,000 people in public housing who, in many cases, are functionally illiterate. $720 million, we could give them, an education. For $258 million, we could provide literacy programs for 5 million at-risk children. That's $20 per child per year, literacy coaching. And there's even a program to do it. It's called Reaching Out and Read. For $650 million, we could provide technical education and internships for 50,000 low-income young people. Give them a start. Launch them into careers in their lives. For $234 million, see, none of these are even $1 billion. And Trump is saying, I'm going to get $8 billion. For $234 million, job training and life skill coaching for 36,000 prisoners. So when they, are integrated back into their societies, we don't have high recidivism rates. This is something that every European country does this. We don't. We could enroll struggling 10th grade boys. This is a particular at-risk group. For $322 million for 11% of all our 10th grade boys, which is, about the percentage who are, in all probability, going to get out of high school or maybe not even graduate from high school and end up, with a life that just doesn't work because they really didn't have that education that they needed. For $100 million, we could fund research into crime, drug use, and high school graduation rates and poverty. We could, the Treasury Department estimates that for every dollar that they spend funding the Internal Revenue Service, they get back $6 in taxes. And the Republicans, ever since Reagan, have been defunding the IRS year after year after year. It's down to the point now where it's very rare that the IRS even audits billionaires anymore. They mostly just audit average working people because, it's easier and faster and they can keep their audit numbers up. $250 million, we could fund the IRS. For $481 million, we could give a 6% raise to 200,000 teachers. That would be all the teachers in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas, for example. 6% raise. We could provide financial coaching to 5.9 million struggling Americans for a little over $1 billion. We could train 542,000, quote, working poor Americans for only $43 million. We could buy bed nets to protect 20 million families from malaria. Now, that would be mostly in other countries, but it would save 20,000 lives. I mean, you know, the list goes on. We could provide vitamin A supplementation for 100 million children and prevent blindness all over the world for $270 million. We could purify water for 25 million people for $33 million. I mean, where should our priorities be if we're going to have an emergency? And if Trump is successful in establishing this precedent, what should a Democratic president do if they're going to declare an emergency?